We're talking about the importance of connection, how important building connection is, our own connection to God, our own connection to identity, our own identity, connection to one another, importance of forgiveness. These are things that most people have nowhere to go to discover. These are my friends that are here that I'm going to let introduce themselves. I will say that they're all coaches. They're all successful coaches, but I'll just let them introduce themselves, and then we'll go from there, starting with Tommy.
I'm Tommy Donatel. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Jamie, and I'm really excited to get this discussion going. Defensive backs coach for the Washington Commanders. This will be my 9th season in the NFL.
Chad Pruitt from Auburn, Alabama. I am the happiest person up here because I just recently retired. So really excited about what's going on. And, we're a part of a ministry across the country right now where we're seeing identity and young people lacking that. And so we're excited to dive in today. And I coached for 30 years, the last 11 years at Auburn University.
Hello, my name is Ed Donatel, and I'm a football coach in the last 42 years, 32 in the National Football League, and I'm just here to share with friends and learn today.
I'm Tony Bennett, and I just also recently retired. I was the head basketball coach at the University of Virginia for 16 years, and then I was at Washington State before that. So I'm excited to be here and just share the things that the sport has taught us through success, but a lot of failure.
My name's Richie McKay, and I feel like I should say I'm getting closer to retirement now, but I have the privilege of working at Liberty University and really excited to be a part of what we're doing today.
The system that we operate in is built on production and success, and you get your identity from success and power and all these kinds of things. And so when we look at the world of sports, it can be a place of real redemption, but it's also there's a side of it that's just as equally dangerous, right? It's where there's pressure and all that. And so I kind of want to come at this high level, kind of from the negative perspective first. So I would love it if, especially currently in the way that you've been in it a while, what is the way that the sports world contributes to sort of the negative side of things? And from your perspective on the inside, what are some of the dangers of sort of the big organized sports scene that you've experienced? I'm just going to go right down each of you.
For me, it's pretty evident. When you watch sports today, there can be a lot of greed with whether it was money, contracts, NIL nowadays. Those things can be a deterrent of what team can really be together there, and connection. It can really pull teams apart, pull people apart, and get people off of base. So for me, that's kind of the dangers that I've seen in my coaching career. The relationships with people can be ruined. Best friends, coaching, players can ultimately be severed through these issues. So it's something that we have to fight against, really on a yearly basis.
Okay.
Yeah, I think for me, the anxiety and the stress that I'm seeing from our players. And so it's almost like the sports is a refuge, a time where we can just set that aside. But they have the pressures of, hey, I want to make as much money as I possibly can. We also have my uncle who's asking for money. I need to send money back home. I'm comparing myself to another player on the team that's making more. And so we've had more conversations in the last 3 years since I now started about just having how to deal with that personally. And so, those guys come in and they sit down and they're like, Coach, I'm feeling all this added pressure. Obviously, there's a scoreboard and we know who wins and loses, but I'm also feeling this pressure from home. I'm feeling this pressure from fans and donors. And I don't think that was something that when we started NIL and it started, I don't think that was something everybody thought would take place this quickly. So anxiety at a higher level is what we're seeing.
Yeah, I think that the way times are going, it's being more readily accepted that you can leave your team and your community at any time, and it's accepted. It's okay as long as you put value on it and you're making a dollar. So I think that's a challenge today.
Yeah, I think sports is one of the greatest classrooms there is, and you're seeing such a more of a transactional versus the transformational side of things, and that that's hard to see, but there's that idea when I was a player, even as a coach, and seeing it in the young men that I coached, just that fear of failure and I'm not enough. And what is the media going to say about me? What's the world going to say? With social media, you're constantly faced with this tension of trying to be in the moment, but, well, what are they saying about me? And that fear of not living up to it and what that'll look like if you fail. And I think you have to deal with that. But it really has, as Chad said and Ed, it's become so transactional, and that's something I think you really have to fight.
I would agree exactly with that, and add to, I think when you first start playing the game that you do on the sidewalk or in the park, you do it out of the love for something that you're trying to be great at, and you enjoy the fellowship of the people you get to do it alongside with. And I think there's an absence of that now. There's a purity that has vanished because of the emphasis that we place on the individual. And I heard it once said that teamwork is the ultimate competitive advantage, both because it's so elusive and so rare. So instead of being connected, I think sometimes you see the negative part of it being so separated.
Something to add, kind of anecdotal. Like we've had guys at halftime on their phones checking Twitter to see what people are talking about them after the game. It's the first thing they look at, and it's like you got to fight against that. It's just such a negative or positive thing too, but they're just so consumed with that. What do people think about me? Am I enough? Like we're talking about, and it's real. It's you can see it with your own eyes.
Yeah, and so is this something that the players are bringing when they come? Something that they've already got when they come there, that kind of pressure? Would you say it's already present in them? Where are they getting that from? Where would you say?
Probably just society at large. It's just always everything's about comparing and measuring. And nowadays, you talk to some of these college coaches they're getting recruited as freshmen, 8th graders. It's early. There's websites talking about these recruits early as 8th grade, 7th grade, whatever it is. But I think it's very early on, and you even talk about it sometimes, even as early as grade school, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, they know, they're comparing themselves to their classmates or getting into a certain school. I think it's just really evident in society, like early on.
Yeah, and I can be really, really happy with my contract till I find out what you had and what you got. And then as soon as that takes place, comparison's the thief of joy. And so now I can't just worry about how excited I was. The first time some of these guys have ever made any kind of money. And they're super excited until they find out what everybody else is making. And so that's where that comparison comes in, that not enough.
Yeah, I'm going to quote someone, but Carl Jung has a saying, and I shared it a lot. If the world asks you who you are and you don't know, it will tell you. And I just think the world is screaming at all of us, but young people so much. And it will chew you up and spit you out if you don't have an identity. And I know we're going to talk about that and aren't grounded in those things. And with Tommy and with Ed, they're both, in the NFL professionally. We're college coaches, but, you deal with it on a different level. You've been in 3 Super Bowls. You have 2 Super Bowl rings. You've seen it at the highest level. And even how the pro game has changed, you're in a great time. But I always thought college was more pure and it's drifted into that, but how you deal with it at the professional level, at the highest level, that's because that is a little more transactional than what college used to be.
It sure is, and it looks like college is becoming more like the pros, and the pros is, there's a middle ground there now. But with the pro game is built on some truth. There's contracts, there's amounts and so forth, and there's a calendar, and it's consistent. So it kind of works. But no matter what somebody makes or what they have, they're going to need coaching and guidance. People still have problems. They wake up with problems and challenges in their homes with their teammates and so forth. And I think just as you mentioned about we grow up and we enjoy and love these games, we got to recapture that because it's getting away from us, and it really comes back to the love of the game and the connectedness of people. We're all from team sports. These are team sports, and team sports are connected and you draw from each other, and that's where you get your strength.
Yeah, Jamie, you asked, like, where did it start? I think in some cases, albeit unintended, in the home, like parents may be operating out of their own woundedness or the way they were raised, and they put that same pressure or expectation on their child. So when you're 8, 9, 10 years old and you start worrying about your performance, and like I've seen it over and over again, mom or dad calls, hey, how'd you do? Well, we won. Well, how many points did you score? And when that barometer or that measurement, like all of a sudden they attach it to, that's how I'm successful, which is, as we all know, it screams a lie. So I think unfortunately sometimes, at least in Western culture, I think it could start in the home.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So this is a curiosity on my part, but you were talking about how you're playing out in the street, whatever, and it's just fun, and you're just playing for the joy of the game, the love of the game. In your experiences, at what age, when does a kid start realizing, okay, this just isn't about having fun? When do they get that? Like, is it the first time a scout sees them? Or like, when did they realize that we're going to make a shift away from this is just for having a great time and being with my buddies to, wow, there's pressure added to this? When does that happen?
I mean, for me personally, I think it was high school. I think when I was playing in early 2000s, they were just starting Rivals.com. They were just starting all those, MaxPreps.com, all those recruiting websites. And you could go up and look up your stats and your stars and all that. And I think it was the first time it really felt like, oh, this is real, and like everyone's comparing me and scouting me and all that stuff. So it's, I think that was kind of the first memory of like, oh, okay, this isn't just fun. Like there's more attached to this.
So I didn't even know that this exists. Obviously, I didn't have to look at that for any reason. But wow, to go online and see how you measure up, that's incredible. Like, is that your experience? That's when people start to like say, wow, this is more than a game.
I mean, in basketball, it starts earlier than that. I mean, it's middle school. So, you go watch, especially if a college coach was to walk over during one of the travel ball games and sit down and watch an eighth grader play, all of a sudden it becomes more than just a game, like automatically. And you guys have seen that for years. And, it's hard to tell what they're going to be as an eighth grader, let's be honest. But they see a college coach at these events, and that pressure really goes up.
Wow. So any kind of social media where you're looking and measuring yourself, you're losing joy. Pretty much in anything that you're looking to measure yourself on, right? And that, which is our whole culture at this point now. So it starts young, whatever vocation you're in. And so then your challenge as coaches well, let me ask you this question, and maybe you can't answer it, but I'll try. So I'm a player. I'm going on a team. I obviously want to be coached by a coach who, in effect, loves me and not my performance, but me. Like, what's the difference between those two kinds of coaches? How would I know what's the difference between how those coaches coach, would you say?
I think someone who's going to be truthful, speak the truth in love. My father burned it into my head, don't be fake, don't be a phony. Be true to who you are when you coach. Don't be fake fluff. Speak the truth. They're your own. And he talked a lot about compassion. He said it doesn't mean you can't coach them with a fire and an intensity. You teach them well. You're going to make mistakes. You'll have to ask for forgiveness. But never lose sight of compassion as a coach. And I think, over time, genuineness and truth always wins out as a coach. And I think sometimes we think we have to be a certain way. But I think when you're truthful and genuine, young people will be drawn to that.
Yeah, I hear you say all the time, you can't give away what you don't have or what you don't possess. And I read a book by Joe Ehrman years ago, and he asked 4 questions in the book. that we're all supposed to answer for coaches or leaders or influencers. Number one, why do I coach? The second question is, why do I coach the way that I do? The third is, what's it like to be coached by me? And I think when you take an account for some of those questions, you get to the last one, what's my barometer of success? And in answer to your question, I think if it's true, you can't give away what you don't possess. Like, you got to know who you are, and because the way I see me affects you. And if I'm internally right, then what I'm trying to lead out of or give away becomes, there's a shift from me-centric to other-centric. And that's when I think you had a chance to add value to someone's life.
You know, for me, it's, the cliche, they don't care about what you know before they know how much you care about them. So getting to know them, getting to know what makes them tick on a relational level, I think is obviously hugely important, as we all know. But a quick story, like I had a coach in college, super successful, big screamer, out of control at times, really good coach though, love him. And then one year he came back and he was a little different. He was a little more relational. He was a little bit more compassionate. And, we kind of asked him what's going on. He's like, well, my son got into the 7th grade, and then I went to a practice and saw my son struggle, and I just, you treat it like it's one of your kids now. And it's like, I was stuck with me, like, when I'm coaching somebody, that's someone's son, that's someone's brother. It's a human being, first of all, before like football players. So having that in mind as you're coaching is, hugely important for that relational piece.
That's good.
Yeah, I played for my father in college, and he was a fiery Italian. So in Green Bay, and he used to get after me at times, but I always knew it was my dad. I had that safety net, like, he loves me. And I think when you have that, it allows someone to coach you truthfully and honestly, but that's so significant, what you said, so I definitely agree with that.
Give me an example of a person that influenced you in the way that you would want to be coached and want to coach another person.
I got an easy answer. My dad here, growing up with him and watching how he related to all of his players and kept it in balance, family life, work life, always tried to include me in things, sneak me into meetings, usually when he probably wasn't supposed to, was just super impactful to me. And the way he, treated everybody, whether it was the custodian, the head coach, the owner, everybody was the same, and he instilled that in us and all the brothers and sisters. But definitely, my dad obviously was a huge impact on me growing up, wanting to be a coach.
Yeah, for me, I was sitting there thinking about, because I coached my daughter for a while, and that's a whole nother situation. But I think, and I look at these two coaches down here and just think about, as a young coach, what I was doing is trying to find someone who I thought represented God and what they did and coached the right way. Now, I know you don't know someone specifically and what they do every single day, but somebody who tries to lead the right way and uses their platform for God. And so as a young coach, and even when I got into college coaching, I started trying to learn all I could about people who had God in the center of their life and coach the way that God would have us to coach. And so for me, it was trying to find coaches at this level who were doing it right.
Well, I had a lot of people that influenced me over the years, but it really came back to the people that showed great dedication to learning the game and becoming proficient. And then there was another nugget, and it was people. The people that connected with their people and learned their stories and learned about them and were great teachers. Those were the guys that I followed.
Yeah, Tommy, like you, my dad, obviously, I coached with him, and then I played for him. And one of the things I always would try to tell younger coaches, you made it sound like we're real old coaches, the way you looked at us.
I wasn't going to mention that, but yeah.
So, which we are. But the thing I always try to tell him is when he would cross the line or make a mistake, he would say to the team, whether it was in the moment, the next day, forgive me, I made a mistake. We couldn't do this without you. Sometimes my perfectionism, my anger gets in the way. But when your coach or your leader is willing to say, forgive me, and go on. But then you'd be willing to run through a brick wall. And I think that's such a lacking quality sometimes in today. We have to be right. We have to know it all. We have to. No, you can be vulnerable and say, I was wrong, and I thought that was a significant thing that I took from him that I thought was important to share to others and coach in that way too.
That's really good. Jamie, I'm still being coached and influenced by people that are in my life that I call them my protection team. Like they know the real me, and when I'm not sounding right or looking right, they'll pick up the phone. But I think my earliest influence was my college coach, Claude Terry. He was the first man that I had ever met that actually loved me regardless of how I performed, and that was really meaningful to me. It allowed me to make a mistake and not be shamed by it.
That's good. Jamie, I was going to tell you, Billy Graham has and I don't know who this is going out to, if it's coaches or even people who have a small group with him, but Billy Graham was credit to him, a quote that says, a coach will influence more people in 1 year than perhaps the average person, or maybe he said a pastor will in a lifetime. You have such an opportunity to influence when you're with them for that, 4 years, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it was. So it's a powerful, as he's talking about, as all of us are talking about, the influence of a coach.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. And that's the point of why I'm asking you guys to be here to share, is because this platform that you have as coach is so hugely influential. And it's kind of like a greenhouse in the middle of a Arctic Circle. It's a place where players can come from who knows where. And Ed, I want you to talk about this. From who knows where, they don't know each other. They're from all kinds of backgrounds, and they have this time in their life where they're going to be together, maybe for the first time under someone that can, and you've all said it, that's why I asked the question, you have to have a model. You have to have a model to look to. Humans can't do what they've never seen. And that's why that coach position is so valuable if the coach is a good coach, one that's interested in them. Why that coach position is so valuable and influential. They have this time in their life where they can learn in areas that is more than just transactional, more like we got to win at all costs, but actually we're trying to develop you as a human being, which I'm sure in a competitive sport is not easy, because like Tommy said earlier, you have to like take time out to do that with people, and you're on a schedule to win and to produce and all of that thing in our culture, to like take time out and sit with a person and talk about, well, Ed, you talk about this, talk about how you would get people to learn their story. How did you do that? What was a practice you had for that?
Well, we first felt our purpose was to help people find their best. And they're all unique people. How do we bring out the best? And we didn't think we could do that without knowing the person first. And we demonstrated ourselves. We'd tell our story so they see we're vulnerable, that we're human, we've had setbacks. And then we'd get a couple people along the line to tell their stories and gradually get them to open up and tell theirs. We want to know about you. We got to meet you where you are. You're important to us. Your uniquenesses are important to us. And when we know that, we can reach them, we can all help each other. You know, when things come up, because we know about each other and we know similarities and respect differences and so forth. So that's really important. We did that with players. We did it coach to coach. We did it with staffs, but just truly valuable.
Yeah, and just to add that, we did a similar thing at the Commanders, and it was hugely beneficial. We started it last year with just our position group, and it grew from there. Our head coach saw it and wanted to do it with everybody in the whole team. So we did it with players, coach, like my dad said, players to players, coaches to coaches, everybody involved. But one story to talk about, we had one of our defensive backs tell his story, probably 10 to 15 minutes on each player would go, and he took like 45 minutes, almost the whole meeting, because it was so in depth, and he had so many life experiences, and it was truly powerful. And he was from Southern California, kind of grew up in the gang life, all those, stories that go along with that. And he got done, and he was like, hey, that was therapeutic for me. Like, I needed that. Like, it was really powerful. And then another player came up to him and said, hey, I don't know about gangs, but I know about pain, and I can relate to you. And so right then, man, we got a connection, and that's what we were, at the Commanders, we had a really good season. And what I kind of contributed to is how fast we connected. And Coach Quinn would always talk about, like, if we can connect fast, that's how we'll win. And he said, if it takes us longer to connect, then we won't win as much. So it's all about that connection piece, and it really humanizes the people in the group. And we don't look at them in strict competition all the time. It's just, hey, that's another brother that we're playing football with. He's gone through some of the same things I've gone through. And we would put up, to be specific, when they would tell their story, they would have a PowerPoint with their pictures with their grandma, their grandpa, their dad, their hobbies, their football journey, things they like to do. So it really made it come to life. Like, you could see his street that he's talking about, that, oh, I grew up down here, I went outside this gate, but I wasn't allowed down this street because that's where the gangs were. I mean, it was a really cool experience to hear all the players and where they came from, and it just humanized them, and it just grew us closer together through that pain that they were able to share, that you've often talked about. You'll often connect over fear and pain more than just unconditional love at times. So it was really cool to see that this spring and the last year.
Wow, that's amazing.
And every year when you have a new team, there's an urgency to teach your scheme and get everything put together. But there's nothing more important than the foundation. You start with your people, learning your people. Teach less stuff. Get your people connected. Get them moving in a direction together.
And to add to that, the NFLPA now, there's strict guidelines. You have 1 hour to meet with them a day. There's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, OTAs, all that stuff. Very strict. Everyone has the same amount of time. And Coach Quinn, Coach Carroll, when I was in Seattle, same thing. First 3 days are all about just getting to know each other, culture. And you have to sacrifice, like he's saying, some of that schematic teaching for the foundation of culture. There'll be way more culture leaks than any kind of schematic errors. And we truly believe that, having that foundation will bring us through those tough times. Because in sports, you're going to lose a game or 2 or 3 in a row. And we did last year. We lost 3 in a row at one point. And the foundation that brought us through, we were preparing for those moments all the way back in May, building that foundation. So it's just hugely important never to skip that step. Even when you want to get going on the install or the scheme, really sit down and take your time with that and make sure everyone's connected.
What did you say, culture leaks versus schematic?
Yeah, there's always way more cultural leaks than any schematic errors that you have. So, we're always worrying about up all night, all the schematic stuff, but you really should be worrying about the culture and the issues you have with your players and coaches.
Yeah, and see, I think it's astounding that where in our society is that being done besides this scenario? I don't know. Where are you going where they're like, we just want to hear your story first before we do anything else?
Our coaching staff did it, and they were like, I've never done that before. And they had a blast with their wives or their mother or father, going through the old pictures and finding it and telling their story. And it was just a really cool, I really, think it would be a great thing for all people to do.
Yeah, we actually do that with our team, in our company. We do it where one person has 30 minutes and they put up, and we're doing it internationally, and they're putting up pictures of where they grew up and all of that. And then the whole rest of the team just listens to them. And all you're allowed to say after it's over is how it made you feel. Like, I really felt sad with you in that part of your life. Or like, why did we hire you now that we know everything about you? But yeah, it's really made a difference. And it was something someone suggested to us. One of the women on our team said, why don't we do this? And it's been really, it's one of those things, I can't wait to get into that meeting besides all the strategy stuff. What are practices you guys use to do that kind of thing?
We do life maps as well. I don't know what you call them, but we do life maps where the team gets in there and they do have the pictures, et cetera. I think the number one thing that connects our team, we just went to the Final Four this past year, and we've had 1 million people ask, because we don't really have a first-round draft pick. So how did you get so much out of this team? But we were connected, and we were playing for the person beside us. And how did we get there? We got there because we shared vulnerabilities with each other. We shared our darkest secrets and our fears. And as we started looking down and we said, okay, you too, okay, I'm dealing with the same thing. It allowed us to connect in a way that I've never seen a team connect. But it started with us giving them the opportunity to share the highs, but also the lows of things that they've been through. That's how you get connected.
Yeah, I got to coach with Richie. We were together for a number of years, and in this last year, since I've been retired, I would go and watch some of his practices, and he does a culture class, and I sit in on those, and I'm just amazed at how he makes those guys, speaks truth to them and connects them, and I just think it's such a powerful thing. And we did something, I think it was I read it from John Gordon, we call it the chair exercise, similar. You sit a player down in the chair and say, tell us your hero. Most say their moms, 95% of them do. But tell us who your hero is, a hardship, so the vulnerability, and a highlight. And they go into it. And then it's like the older people know the show Inside the Actor's Studio. We turn it over to the team and say, now you ask them any questions. And it's just getting to know them. But as we're talking about all that, I guess I would, caution might not be the right word, but sometimes you do these experiences, these things to check the box. Okay, now we're going to get into it. It's how you are with them through the course of the year. Do you care? Do you go through the hardships? Are you coaching them the right way? But not just, we did that at the beginning of the year. Okay, now we're going to only be about strategy. To me, that's, the other stuff's just lip service. You better live that. And I think that's the difference. But I've watched that in him, and I've admired that in Richie over the years and how he does that as a coach.
I'll piggyback. Thank you, Tone. I'll piggyback off of that. We live out of this saying, what you do every day is more important than what you do every once in a while. So we won't just do it on occasion. We literally talk about being selfless, the pillars that are the foundation of our program. And I think more than just, and I lived this with him, he's got these pillars that he lived by. What I saw in Coach Bennett and his dad were they actually modeled them. And like you say, like human beings can't do what they don't see. Well, I got to see a man walk in incredible humility and integrity who's at the highest level. So that consistency he deposited in me. And when I went to go back to be a head coach, I took that and started spending the deposits. So I think it's important that you have that daily pursuit because we're only promised today.
Yeah. Yeah, that connection's like so important. There's a lot of studies about in military teams that when a soldier's mortally wounded, if the person with them is a stranger, they die quicker. But if the person with them is someone they've known for a long time, they'll stay alive because that person is with them. And so they try and put teams together that have known each other a long time. They fight better together for each other, greater than whatever the big cause is. So yeah, that connection's important. And in our culture, we don't have that, obviously. In our culture at large, we just don't have this stuff. We don't know each other's stories. We don't have this kind of connection. It's like we're not playing in a thing together. We're just all living out our own agendas in our own private little worlds. And so again, back to this environment where there's a group together with a guide, with a coach, and these practices are so important, whether it's a sports team or a community group or anything. These principles are so valuable, and so that's why I really appreciate you guys talking about them. What would you say is how is fear detrimental in what you do? How do you have to deal with fear on a regular basis, both you and in your teams?
Obviously, it's hugely detrimental. It really kills creativity. It kills in what we would call the player's mind. Playing with a free flow and free mind out there on the field. If you're worried about things, you can't let it loose. You can't cut it loose and go play your best ball. So we often talk about clearing our player's mind as much as possible and, getting through that fear and understanding what that fear is for. There's good fear, but not having it be that, driving mechanism on why you play or how you play is really kind of the key there. But yeah, it's really what probably separates most of these players is how much fear, how much will they cut it loose? Because the playing field is so even in the NFL. It's very minute differences in some of these players at some level, and just the mindset of cutting it loose and playing free and playing in joy has been really the big difference what I've seen.
Yeah, I think fear kills joy. I mean, we've been talking about playing for the love of the game. Well, fear kills that. And I'll be honest with you, my biggest fear is the fear of losing. So, like, I've had to work through that for years and years and years, and constantly comparing myself to someone else. I can't even enjoy the win because I'm thinking about the next one, or, what I'm more excited about, winning or not losing, And so those are things that are real. I think they're very, very real, especially at the college level. I'm seeing our guys, and we just had a great year, but I'm seeing a bunch of our guys that are kind of bound in that fear of not being enough. What is enough? Is it a first rounder? Is it a lottery pick? Is it getting drafted? Is it playing overseas? Is it making mom happy? I mean, is it providing for the family? What is enough? And that fear of them not being able to have enough is causing a lot of anxiety.
Yeah, for sure, it blocks you, and you can't be your best. But I think as a leader, you got to model. You got to reduce fear in them, and you got to reduce it in yourself. Because if you're standing in front of a group, they can feel your fear. And the best way is to model a fearless attitude and show it.
Yeah, I can remember after my senior year in college, I was going to the NBA pre-draft camp, and I played at more of a low to mid-major school, and it was, if you played well for 3 or 4 days, you probably get drafted. And I think my mom and dad noticed going, it was kind of, everything was built up to that moment, and I was fearful because I had worked so hard and I wanted to play in the NBA. And before I left, I'll never forget this, 21, 22 years old, they sat me down and they said, son, no matter what happens, if you go there and fall flat on your face, we love you unconditionally, we accept you unconditionally. And I just almost needed to hear that, and it was like a weight that lifted off of me, because I think you have to. I always would have that practice with our young men, and I'd say, what's the worst that can happen? We lose, you play terrible. As a coach, you get fired. Are you gonna be okay? If you can make peace with that, then you can be freed up. And the best compliment I ever got is when people would come and watch our practices and they'd say, you guys were intense in practice, but there's kind of a joy and freedom. There's a spirit of that in your practice. And that would make me feel so good, because that, I think, is, the fear thing will work for a little bit to motivate you, to get you there, but it runs out. It has a short shelf life. And so the ability to get to joy and freedom, you have to kind of confront that, but unconditional love and unconditional acceptance. Like I had that from my family, but ultimately I know that comes from my faith in the Lord, and that allows me to kind of work through that. But you have to deal with it. You can't just ignore it.
Yeah, great word. You guys are good. I think I once heard it said, feelings, emotions, or fear, they can be great servants, but they're horrible masters. And actually, I heard Donna speak about how fear is healthy in some ways for you, because it's meant for your protection, right? God gave us that emotion. But when you're mastered by it, it's so debilitating. You tend to live in the false, especially men. I think men who usually are adverse to confrontation, like, we have this propensity to put on these masks, and we present to others this version of ourselves that we want them to see. Well, man, it gets exhaustive. Like, we keep putting on different masks, whether it's promoted or inspired by self-promotion or self-protection. And I think when you do that, you're living in the false, and you have no chance of impacting others for the long run. They might applaud you, might get exactly what you wanted them to see, a good pat on the back or some affirming word, but there's nothing that penetrates their soul. And that, for me, and again, it's consistency, it's every day. I try and wake up every morning and ask God, who do you say I am, so I can live in my true identity.
Could I say, I might have the greatest failure story known in the history of college basketball. No, we were a 1 seed 4 times in the NCAA tournament, and never in the history of the sport had a 1 seed lost to a 16 seed. We had a great year. We won the regular season ACC, the conference tournament. We were the toast of the college basketball world, the overall #1 seed. And I remember, I don't want to be that team that loses, because it's a lot of pressure in that game. And, you're like, I don't want to be. And we lost, and we were the laughing stock of college basketball, ridiculed. There's long stories about that. But you had to face that. And it's funny, sometimes when you go through something you don't want to experience, you don't want to, when you face it, you go through it, and you're with people that you know you can lose with, there is a freedom in that. And it was unique how that happened, but I didn't want it to happen. But when I went through it, it was one of the more powerful, transforming things that shaped the experience I had. But it was humbling, and this sport will humble you that way, and adversity does. But so I understand that in a way most coaches don't.
Can I add to that? By the way, I wasn't with him on the sideline, and I had already been gone, so I had
good. I made note of
nothing to
that.
do with that game.
Of course.
But I had worked with Tone for so long that a lot of people would, when I had left, they'd go through me to get to him because he was hard to get a hold of. And after that game, they lost to UMBC. I think it was by 18 points. Like they got beat, and soundly. And
Thank you.
That's enough, Tony. Yeah.
and I'm watching the game, and I'm hurting for him. Like this is my brother. Like, and he faced the camera, and he said, "Weeping cometh in the night, or endure for the night, but joy cometh in the morning." And the humility and he'd never tell that story, but the humility and the grace that he displayed in that moment was far greater than the next year when they won the national championship, and he was being applauded and celebrated by many. And I just think that was a chance for the world to see who this man's soul was. And again, if you're going to influence others, you got to be real, and it can't just be in the moment when the camera's on you. It's got to be lived out on the daily. And I'm telling you, that inspired many, including myself, who had walked and journeyed with him for years. Yeah, that'd be
Well,
$1.50.
He did bring up the national championship, so I guess I'd jump in right here because that is the team that beat us. So
Oh, yeah.
Virginia,
Yeah.
so one of his greatest days was one of our worst days. But I remember going back and seeing that press conference, and I empathized. I felt, man, I was feeling and praying for you during that time. And then a year later, just 1 year later, we're playing the Virginia Cavaliers, and we're up. I don't even want to go through it again. I'll start bawling or something. But we're up at the end of the game, and we foul one of his players, and he makes 3 straight free throws, and they go on to win the national championship. And I remember going into the locker room. I remember the stadium. It was in Minneapolis. It was so far. It took you like 10, 15 minutes just to get back to the locker room. And I was praying the whole time. I was like, God, give us the right word. We have such a platform right now. How we respond right now is going to speak way more than if we'd have won. Give us the words. And I started praying for our guys. Guys, God, give those guys the words so that we have the opportunity to still point people to you. And it's when I look back at that, it was the greatest time for Tony because of what he had been through, but it gave us that same opportunity, the opportunity that you took advantage of the year before. We were able, because you know how it works. 10 minutes after you lose in a very tough situation, and one of the toughest losses of our life, somebody sticks a microphone in your face and says, okay, tell me what happened. Well, you usually don't have a million godly thoughts at that time. And so just for God to be able to use that opportunity, it's been something I've been able to share about all across the country, because at the lowest point, you have such an opportunity to point people to Jesus. And it was at our toughest moment that we were able to give God the most glory. And but we got a lot of that strength from 1 year earlier watching Tony and how he dealt with that.
Yeah, I don't think we would have won the national championship had we not lost in that manner. And it's just what it is. And if you're going to be a coach or a leader, my father shared with me again, he said, recruit players or hire leaders you can lose with first. And that's the greatest truth serum there is.
Yeah, that's exactly. It's like, when our teams are overseas working, it's not who can we win with, it's who can we lose with, who's going to stay together when we lose, because that's more what you end up doing than winning. Yeah, so I love that. I love that example. Again, that's why the whole coaching sport area is so valuable, because you get in these positions where you have the chance to lose well. And I was going to even ask you, tell us how you lose, but you already, I mean, how far can you have a conversation without getting to that point? If you don't mind being vulnerable here, like, what would you say is a fear that you deal with on a regular basis, just as a human or as a coach or whatever? Like, my fear is always that in my role, I'm going to disappoint. Like, that's just my never-ending. I'm always conscious of it. I have to have. I'm going to ask you your processes too. But what would you say is that kind of main fear, anxiety you wrestle with?
For me, it's very similar, not good enough, disappoint. And you really have to, as you've spoken about, empty yourself and really get in touch, through your true identity, and get in touch with your inner voice and really figure out, who am I, what's my identity, and what can I hang my hat on a daily basis. So when you go through those tough times, when you're feeling anxiety about certain things, whether it's public or in private, you got to be able to go through these processes, sit down, like you said, empty yourself, let that out, speak truth into what you're feeling at that moment, be able to say it out loud with your community or someone that you trust, or with yourself, and be able to work through it, because it's going to happen, and you got to release those stressors from your body, from your life, and move forward in that way.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned mine earlier, the fear of losing, and obviously in the athletic world, the scoreboard's there, so we know if you win or you lose. But just in life, I grew up without a father, and so it made me want to be the best father I could possibly be. But I still would look back and say, could I have done this different? Should I have done this different? And it kind of became who I was for the long time, until I had to deal with it. Literally had to deal with it and say, okay, God, I am enough. Okay, you made me enough. And what I didn't have growing up, you've already supplied way more than that. And him becoming my Heavenly Father when I met him. And so I think that fear of losing goes way beyond just the scoreboard, and learning how to deal with that on a daily basis, I think, is super important.
Yeah, I think it's the fear of measuring up, being enough. And I think when you get in your latter years, at least I did, I said, man, I'm going to have a good time. And I just thought about the process and let the chips fall where they are. You got to have a couple chips in the bank before you feel that way. But that was a lot better way to live. And if I have another challenge, probably today, would be, every day am I grateful for all these things in front of me, behind me. That's really it.
Yeah, I think, like you said, not the fear of losing, not being good enough, and I really had to face that, because I've been, praised at a high level, but I've been criticized, and that's the thing about sports. It's so public by a lot of people, and how you deal with that. But there's a freedom, again, when you understand who you are. But I think now was I at times so consumed in trying to do it right, but win in a profession that is judged by wins and losses? Did I leave some things behind as a father, as a husband, as a son, as a friend? Because it's an all-consuming profession, and how you look at it. And those are the things probably that I think about a lot now, more than the fear of losing or not being enough.
Can I add something right there? Because God spoke to me when I was trying to deal with that and said, I measure success differently, And I was like, man, I needed to hear that a long time ago. He measures success differently, and that was very, very specific for me, because I am so, it's black or white. I lost or I won, and it's not that way with our Creator.
Yeah, I think it was common to us, right? Not being enough. And I grew up without a father in our home, yet I was still close to my dad, even though he was a distant dad. And when you're a middle child, you kind of live in that syndrome of like, man, no one pays attention. And that trauma, maybe it happened a long time ago, but it still surfaces. I'll tell you a funny story. We were in Greece together. I was with Coach Bennett, and we were doing a clinic, and look, when he's introduced as a former national champion. When I'm introduced, and he coaches here. And so like after it's over, all these people want his autograph, take pictures, and I was trying to find someone that wanted to take a picture with me. So instantaneously, you kind of think like, man, I'm not really important. We went from Athens to this island in Mykonos, and he spoke to me in that time. He said, man's opinion of your importance does not come close to my purpose for you. And like I continue to remind myself daily who he says I am, because out of that, I can overcome that. I'm not enough.
So yeah, just if you don't mind, you're sort of doing it. Just what's your practice of overcoming that? You're saying it a little bit, but if you could just say it again. So I'm a coach. I'm working with win-losses and all of that measurement stuff in whatever sport or whatever arena that I find myself in. I'm wrestling with, I'm not good enough. Our team's not good enough. You're advising that coach. What's a process you would tell them that you go through on a regular basis to just keep even keel, not to lose hope, just to keep going on? What's just sort of your regular process? Richie, you can start and we'll come back this way.
I mean, Tommy said it earlier, just that ability to get quiet, like to wait, remind yourself of who you are. And I'll go back to my why, and Chad, my barometer of success. And in that space, I'm reminded of my purpose. I'm reminded of my identity. And when I live out of that, others can benefit. Because again, the way I see me affects everyone else. And it's rudimentary. You speak about it often, Jamie. Like whenever there's external conflict, it usually stems from internally, the way I feel about myself. And that's got to be right before you can have any lasting influence in someone else's day.
Yeah, I think when Richie and I when he was the associate head coach, he would say it a lot of times if it was a hard situation in the game or after the game or even a good one, he'd say, Tone, this is what you do. This isn't who you are. And so to have someone to like kind of co-labor with and journey together, he'd always say that. And, you know, Lord, who do you say I am? And I think a lot about, it's actually one of my wife's favorite verses in Scripture. Don't conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, and kind of the identity exchange thing. The ability to, look, I started that the world's going to tell you so much stuff, but when you know you're unconditionally loved and accepted by your friends, by your family, but if your faith is important to you, by the Lord ultimately, and you can continue to dwell on the things that are pure, right, lovely, excellent, praiseworthy, it really is that. So that ability to know who I am, and again, not conform and be transformed by the truth.
Yeah, really knowing your identity and knowing your plan and sticking with the process instead of maybe just looking at wins and losses. I've been on many staffs and I've been part of things. If we just get one more win, this is a successful season. If we win the division like 2 out of 3 years, that looks good. And it's more than that, because you never get there. How are you operating? How are you traveling? How are you treating people? And if you do that consistently, I don't think you'll ever have major regrets.
Well, we live in a time of chaos, especially coaches, 12 to 15 hours a day, and it's once you step foot in that office, I mean, everything that could possibly go wrong seems to go wrong almost every day. And so, you know, what I do is take those first few minutes of the day and just say, okay, God, what does your word say about me? You know, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm an overcomer. What does it say that I can do and get my strength from him? And so I just try to quiet my soul just for a few minutes every day.
You know, I really echo what everyone's been saying. But one thing the idea that you kind of brought to us at Seattle was like working from rest and like getting our main level at an even keel, so we can actually transform that to our players and our coaches around us and create it's being able to work from rest and not get too high, not to get too low. and be able to work through some of those issues. When everything's chaotic around you, you're the calm force in the middle of the storm, and you can be that leader. And I think, when you have those losses, the fear a lot, it's really an opportunity to be that leader, to show everyone how to operate and how to be true with yourself and not get, changed by your external forces, but, stay internally with your identity. And I just really liked that thought of like working from rest, and like we're always kind of pursuing that thought, whether we're playing, how quickly can I get to rest in between plays or in between games as a coach, to kind of avoid some of those highs and lows.
Yeah.
I had one thing to add. Over the years, you coach this game of football, and there's a game every 7 days. And there's a lot of stress that goes on during the week, building the plan Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. How's it going to come out? And game day is so rich and so abundant and so beautiful, but so many things can happen. It can come out a lot of different ways, and sometimes you can't control them. And part of the hack I used in the later years is, I'm having joy on Monday. I'm having joy on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and let's go just have a blast at the game. And I use that. And again, there's a lot of important decisions that are being made on those early days. But why not have that joy and that attitude and those thoughts? And that's what we use. And I would recommend that to younger people. Study hard, learn your profession, have credibility, but then get the joy in it. Make it part of it, because then it's much more rich and fulfilling.
And speaking to that, my time in Seattle, it was amazing to see as a younger coach. I'd never experienced this before, but you play the game on Sunday, the players have off Monday, and then you come back in. They come in Monday, then they have off Tuesday. By Wednesday, you couldn't tell if we won or lost the game before. And if anyone's been to Seattle, they can attest to that, because it was just, you would turn the page, and it was getting through that anxiety of the loss. And when players came in free agent, they were like, you win a lot, cool, but I just wanted to see what would happen after that first loss. Would all this culture and really hold true? And they all, oh, well, this is the same. Whether we won or lost, the same process, same energy. And it was just really cool to see as a young coach, oh, this is allowed. Like, it was almost like permission. Like, you didn't have to get down and start yelling just because we lost the game and act like it was a tragedy. Like, this was how we did things. We're not going to change because of one loss, and stay true to who we were as a team.
So that's kind of like staying in the identity of the team no matter what happens.
We talked about that a lot. Like, every individual had an identity, and then every year, because there's so much turnover in the NFL, our team would take on a new identity. And we've had meetings and talk about it and come up with words and ways to like describe ourselves as a team and what we wanted to stand for. So I thought that was super powerful to understand your own identity, your position group, team, all those conversations can kind of help set standards and stay true to who you are through the tough times.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting that a team develops an identity itself. The team has an identity. And I know lots of people talk about that, but that's not something that you necessarily ever see really happen, that a group really has their own identity, which I think is, what do you do to develop that? Any besides what we're talking about, is there any other things for the team itself to have an identity? What kind of practices for that?
We would just actually have meetings and just ask the guys, like, what do you want the tape to look like when we turn it on? Physical, fast, and smart, or something that comes to the players' minds, and they would just own that, and it was really powerful. But it was giving those players ownership, and some coaches we like to control things a lot as coaches and not leave anything up to chance, but opening up those spaces for players to put ownership into it as well, and feel like they're contributing to it, I think is super powerful as well, just to kind of, it's their identity just as much as us as coaches. So we're coming together kind of to form that vision together that we want to display for the world to see.
Ours this year was hungry and humble. That was our identity, our team identity. And so what does that look like? Well, that means you show up every day ready to go to work. And then when God gives you an opportunity to be successful, you show humility. You serve your brother. And so we would talk about that every single day. And then what does that actually look like? Okay, so play it out, give them opportunities to see it in themselves and in others.
I think there needs to be an adherence to a transfer of ownership where you actually listen to what they want and then try and shape it into something that is common to what our standard, our mission, our purpose is. And that's like Tommy said, that is not easy because, like, men, we love control, right? But to actually hear, and for us older coaches, Chad, we got to learn how to be relevant to them, speak their language. And oftentimes it's through all these social media platforms. But I think just a commitment of like getting on their level and listening to them would be foundational to kind of creating some unity that we could come up with a common identity that we're all pursuing.
Yeah, I think, again, when I talk to coaches, even when I talk to businesses or people, I think with young coaches or some coaches, if I can't watch your team play and say, man, this is what we hang our hat on, I better be able to see it, and you better be able to, your players better be able to verbalize it. This is who we are. We value these. This is how we're going to play tactically or, the intangibles, but it better be seen. And a lot of people, it's the saying, you'll fall for everything if you don't stand for anything, or you're kind of not, there's not a true identity. And I think the good teams, the good leaders, there is an identity. It's clear cut and they don't waver from it. And I think that is so significant about identity. And then in saying that, I was like, well, what about myself? What about myself? What's my identity? If people looked at me, what do I hang my hat on? Am I kind? Am I joyful? Am I whatever I think my giftings are? As I was just sitting here, I thought, well, I always use that advice, but I hope people would certainly know that when they see it, because it should be pretty clear.
Right, yeah, you can't give away what you don't have, right? You can't preach something to someone that you yourself don't possess. Yeah, I think that's fascinating. Well, I had a friend, he was just interviewed by some well-known company, and he didn't necessarily want the job. It was a nice offer. He wanted just to see it through. And so he was in there with the CEO of the company and the board, and their values were hanging on the wall. And he said, how well do you go by these values? And they said, yeah, we go by them. And he goes, okay, let's start with number one and tell me how you live this out in your personal life. And they said, we're going in a different direction than you. And he was done, the meeting. And they called him later and said, yeah, we're not going to choose you. And he said, too late. He said, you don't even know your own values. Like, you don't even walk by your own values. And that's what you're talking about. It's like, we say we have these things, but we don't really have these things. And how can we go forward if we don't actually know our own identity? So I think that's one thing that we're missing. And again, this is why I love the concept of coaching, is because people can come from a broken and fragmented and separated world without an identity and have the potential of coming into a community where they can actually discover all of this in a pretty high pressure situation, where we're striving for excellence. When I discover my identity and I understand what my true identity is, then the goal of my life is to give that identity away to the world at the absolute highest level I can. It doesn't, as you guys are saying, it doesn't make me weaker because I'm not playing out of anger or fear, which some people say is a motivator. But again, in a good fight, you can beat anyone that's angry or fearful in the end because they're not thinking. They're just raging. But a joyful person is very hard to fight because they'll stay forever. And they'll adjust, and so when you get in an environment where that's being modeled and that's being trained, you can receive instruction, you can adjust, and you'll rise to huge levels of excellence, even unto death, really, actually. So there's one other component I want to ask you guys about, and I think this is one that's huge and probably not talking about in coaching seminars. Is what's the role of forgiveness in coaching? Like, that's got to be a pretty big component, not only for, like, Ed, for, like, I love, like, sitting in your office and seeing all of the accolades that you've accumulated over the years, and the way that you don't talk about them, like I might talk about them if they were all behind me going, yeah, that was that Super Bowl, and this is, but by the way that to you, it's just part of what you've done in your life and you're humble about it. But I know forgiveness is a big deal in that journey. How you survive that journey is with forgiveness. So I want you all to think about it's a super important component of how we do use compassion. Like, how does forgiveness, I even remember Pete Carroll talking about this with some players, like, you have to forgive and they have to, like, how does that play? Because I don't think we ever really talk about this. And I know in companies with CEOs, like, that's not a big topic, is forgiveness, but it's hugely important. So think about that. How have you needed to be able to forgive or to be forgiven, maybe?
You know, speaking on Coach Carroll, he used to say the phrase, you got to give your brother a break sometimes. And that always stuck with me because when you are, dealing with players and human beings, really, and you let people have ownership over it, it can get a little messy. It's not going to be perfect all the time. They might not say the things exactly how you want them to say it or produce on the field exactly how you want them to produce, but that grace that you give them is actually going to bring you guys closer together, being able to commit to that and understand that, I'll forgive you, you'll forgive me, and we're going to move forward together. But that was a huge aspect of grace that was really connective to our team in the long run, and he spent a lot of time talking about that with our guys because how important it was to get that out of your body, that stress, that burden off of you so you can stay true to your true identity and move forward in that in a clear and correct way. So it was very prevalent in Seattle, talking about forgiveness and grace and how we treat each other.
Coach Pearl would always say, all right, now don't be defensive. You knew what was about to happen after he was going to tell you that. It was going to be ugly. And so, for our staff, we had to have short-term memories. I mean, we had to be able to put things behind us quickly. And we actually had a really cool thing happen this year, actually, at a press conference. Dylan Cardwell, one of our best players that'll be playing in the NBA next year, basically talked about him having to forgive Janai Broom. Janai Broom was player of the year, was all of this, and he kept comparing himself to him. And so in front of the world, Dylan talks about forgiving Janai. Janai had no idea he did anything wrong. So it was obviously setting Dylan free more than it was setting Janai free. But that is what you want, a culture where forgiveness is something that happens all the time. Yeah, it becomes part of who you are. And I think if it starts with the coaches, you're going to see it filter down to the players.
I think it can come when you're proficient, established a little bit, you gain a little confidence, but you have to be able to say you're sorry to your teammate, to your team, tell them, admit your mistakes. And I think when you're truthful, it can play out. There's other times in sporting world where you're going to go through disappointments. There's firings, there's huge losses, that if you don't let go of them, they'll multiply and they'll affect you going forward. And over time, I got pretty good at that, letting things go so I could grow, or otherwise I wouldn't be here. But I think that's important. You got to assess it and kind of bury it after a little while and move forward. Forgive yourself so you can grow.
Yeah, I just recently was reading a book, and a line really struck me. It said, follow a leader who walks with a limp and not a strut. And all of us we're so formed by the scars or the wounds that we have, and those shape us. We know how many times we've erred, made mistakes. People have dealt kindly with us or harshly. And as I mentioned, the greatest influence my father had on me as a coach when I was a player and then when I coached with him is when and that's what I share, when he stepped over the line, he would say, forgive me, I made a mistake. I touched on that earlier. It's the greatest power there is, forgiveness. And unforgiveness, I actually remember Donna saying, if you need to forgive other things, it's like drinking poison and hope the other person gets sick. And that really, when I did the class, that really stuck with me about unforgiveness. And I mean, we should be unoffendable because of how much we've been forgiven so many times by so many people. And ultimately, if your faith is important, that's it. So the ability to know and be a leader who's humble and follow those people that don't think they have it all figured out. And forgiveness, it starts with unconditional love, unconditional forgiveness.
I'm not sure I mean, I love all those answers. One of my mentors once told me that three things usually jam us up. Number one, our own sin. Secondly, other people's sin against us. And thirdly, unmet expectations. And I think in every one of those facets, there's going to be it's going to be incumbent upon us to possess forgiveness. And it's going to have to first start with forgiving myself for knowing that God would forgive me for my own sin, or something something I said that didn't meet an expectation. I think it's if you acquire it, I think your relationships will be a lot stronger. Because how many times have we been, I don't know, probably not for you guys, but I've needed to go to my wife and ask for forgiveness once or maybe no, twice daily. But I know that like I've got it for myself, so that not only can I experience it or receive it from her, but I can also give it away.
I think one time listening to you talk, when you guys went over to the Middle East, you were like looking for people to hurt you, so you had the opportunity to forgive them, and that was like one of your tools that you would be able to go into these places and gain respect and gain your leverage there and all that. But I just always thought that was a really cool thought of like, when people hurt you, you usually get pretty defensive, but you guys were actually looking for those situations, so you had the opportunity to forgive those people and influence them.
Yeah, the person that's in the position to forgive owns the room. That's what we always say. The person who's been offended now has the power to see where this is going to go. And so that's a very powerful position. Yeah, so yes, it's been great. Thank you guys for this. So these are the things to me that for people that have impacted my life and in the role of coach in these places where we can influence generations of people on these teams. We're talking about the importance of connection, how important building connection is, our own connection to God, our own connection to identity, our own identity, connection to one another, the importance to understanding our own identity and helping other people discover that, the importance of forgiveness. These are things that most people have nowhere to go to discover. Even in a church environment, these may not be the things. They may hear them talked about, but they don't see them lived out in a real environment where you're in a battle together and you're losing together and winning together and hurting each other's feelings and you're trying to build an identity. It's a unique environment. Sports is a unique environment where this can be experienced. So I really appreciate your experience and what you're doing and how you've done it. So that's the whole point of what we're doing here. Is this could be a discussion about a company. This could be a discussion about a missions team. This could be a discussion about a special ops team, or a discussion about a community group or a bowling team. This is what makes community work, is what you guys are experiencing. And you experience it on a level that a lot of people don't, because they're not in it at the same level and intensity that you're in it all the time. You're balancing family and winning and losing and being fired when, because it didn't go the way you hoped or planned. Like all of that constant pressure. I don't know how you do it or why you do it, but so I really appreciate that, and I appreciate your position and your vocation and your identity. So just to wrap up, if you could advise, because we got a good age range here, if you could just advise someone that's aspiring to be a coach or a leader or whatever, looking back either a long way or a short way, what would you tell them going in? What would be a couple of the main things you'd want them to think about going in?
For me, it's just true identity. It's finding your voice. It's finding out who you are. We've said it many times, can't give away what you don't have, and really develop the whole person. You're not just developing the football player or the basketball player or baseball player. You really want to, learn to develop the whole person spiritually, mentally, physically, and really, give yourself to others in that way, and you get so much more reward, and that's kind of the way I've really felt the most reward in this business, was giving myself to others, but really not forgetting, like, that's a human being. How can we develop him in all the areas of his life, not just football player, but the wholeness of the person?
I would say add value where you are. You know, so many people, and we get managers, you know, by the day who come and say, Coach, I want to be an assistant coach like you one day, or I want to be a head coach. What do I need to do? I always say, wherever you are, be present where your feet are, add value where you are. You know, you're going to be in different seats along the ride, but figure out what God has made you to be and add value in that. And then look, you got to serve. I think servant leadership to me is the ultimate sacrifice. And I think when people in our profession see that they're willing to serve at every level, then they're much more willing to bring them onto their team. And so, you know, obviously we can talk about identity once you know who you are. You know, people talk about purpose a lot. Well, you can't know your purpose till you know who you are. And so find out who you are. Let God speak to you and find out who you are, so you know what seat to be on the bus.
Yeah, I agree with it starts with your identity. If you know that, you can go the furthest. And what Tom had said about the holistic person, serving that holistic person, you're going to have some success and you're going to have some failures. You're going to get some rings, some trophies. They're going to get dusty. And really what people are going to remember is when they were working with you or for you or together, how'd you make them feel? How did they feel when you were together? That's what they're going to remember. They're going to forget what year you won a national championship or the Super Bowl or whatever it might have been, or what year you got fired. They're going to want to know what kind of person and integrity you live.
That's well said. I think, you know, humility, you know, it says, and that was our first pillar in our program, those who exalt themselves will be humbled, but those who humble themselves will be exalted. And humility is just not thinking too highly of yourself, and the opposite, not thinking too lowly of yourself. That's false humility, and that's kind of what we're talking about, just having sober judgment. Again, identity, knowing who you are. And humility is such a position of strength. And again, tactically, who are you? What do you hang your hat on? But understanding how to come at that with humility. I just think it's the most powerful thing there is. And then passion. You know, we look for young men when I coached who were fiercely competitive. I mean, that they were not lukewarm. They did things wholeheartedly. And that's good and proper to be like on fire for it and faithful with it. So I just think humility and passion, when you know, I think you said humble and hungry, but I do say as a leader, and this was, you asked the question to give something back, I think we hit on it, you better be able to forgive. You better be able to ask for forgiveness and then be forgiven yourself, because you're going to be in a spot where you're in intense situations. So those are the things I think I'd share.
Yeah, really good stuff. I think I'll probably share one of the things that I learned from you and Donna. One of the loneliest places for a college basketball coach is the 30 minutes before tip-off, because your team goes out and they warm up and you're sitting in this locker room all by yourself. And the things that go through your mind sometimes trigger a whole lot of fear. And,
Why didn't you sit with me then when I was the head coach in the locker room? He just left and went out and hung out and ate popcorn, I think.
Yeah, I didn't know Jamie and Donna then. And they talked about, they call it rooms. Like you go into, you never let the room change or add to your identity or take away from it. You go into the room with your identity and you come out with the same identity. And for me, it was just a release that, like, I am who he says I am. And no matter what the outcome is, like, my barometer of success would be totally reliant on what I think God has purposed me to do in my life. And that's given me a freedom to, again, continue on the daily, like, what is my identity? And I remind myself of it. As corny as that sounds, like, I constantly repeat to myself what my identity is so that I can be the best version of me.
Great. Thank you, guys. Super appreciate your time. Thanks for being here with us.